Hello and good afternoon and welcome back. I hope you have time to actually nip out and get some lunch, or maybe just down to the kitchen and get some lunch. Still a beautiful day here in Edinburgh. This is session 3 in today's conference, where we're going to be looking at what the barriers are industry-wide, just in terms of innovating and what can be done to overcome some of those barriers. Our next speaker is Dayton, who's Managing Director of Core 29, which is a Peterson company. And we were talking earlier about the role that culture has. Culture can be a very positive thing, but it can also completely stifle innovation. So, Jay.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for the intro. And afternoon, everyone. My name is Dayton, and I am Managing Director of Core 29. My original title for today's presentation was Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast, after the famous quote by legendary management consultant Peter Drucker. However, when thinking about the growing part that technology and innovation play within today's business, I couldn't help but feel that this quote was missing something a little fundamental and perhaps in need of a little update. So I've added a couple of extra words to the quote and indeed the title, so it now reads, Culture Eats Strategy and Innovation for Breakfast. Hopefully Mr. Drucker won't mind. I hope everyone's had a chance to grab a cup of tea or coffee, as for the next 20 minutes I'm going to talk about the significant impact of the culture culture can have on your business, and indeed either on the success or the failure of any well thought out innovation strategy. I'll also be providing some suggestions on how you can improve your business's appetite for innovation by overcoming some of the common challenges you might face. For a brief context, Core 29 are a technology consultancy who specialise in supporting businesses to achieve digital transformation. We support the life cycle of innovation, from strategy and technology roadmap development, all the way through to vendor diligence, project implementation, and data analysis. For a little over 9 years, we've been working with a large variety of organisations, and I've seen firsthand how a business's culture can have a direct impact on the success or indeed failure of a digital strategy. Now, as a side note, it's a good job this presentation isn't being delivered on a Friday night, as you could play a pretty decent drinking game with the number of times I'm about to say the phrase culture of innovation. You have been warned. So before we dive in, I just wanted to take a moment to define what I mean by business culture in the context of innovation. When you Google culture of innovation or innovation culture, it returns a number of definitions. However, these are kind of separate for culture and separate for innovation. So what Google is definitely lacking is a clear definition that combines both culture and innovation together. The top quote on the slide was probably the best of a mediocre bunch, to be honest, and still has a huge focus on the culture bit and less so innovation. So I decided to come up with my own. And so I have defined and even quantified a culture of innovation as the following. The percentage of people in a business, when asked, how do we do this differently, that respond with ideas and solutions rather than problems. Now, while Google's options for defining a culture of innovation may be a little light, there are a number of studies on the impact of culture on innovation within an organisation. A 2003 study by Jan, Shah and Khan identified the following benefits to an organisation that displays a strong culture of innovation. So firstly, it gives that business a competitive edge. Innovative businesses are more flexible and more receptive towards environmental changes, and due to this flexibility, they're more likely to survive in unstable climates. Culture acts as a stimulant that enhances innovative behaviour among people. A culture that embraces innovation can enhance product innovation and new ideas. And finally, product innovation is positively associated to cultures built on flexibility rather than hierarchical or bureaucratic cultures. The final point is really less about the benefits of an innovative culture and more about the foundations that a good culture of innovation are built on. This links really nicely to the quote on the right-hand side of the screen, which I'll use as a bit of a running theme throughout the remainder of the presentation. The 3 words to remember here are roots and wings. I really like this as a mantra for building a culture of innovation. What it says is, give your business a clear definition of direction, the roots, and then let them get on with it, the wings. Google themselves have a similar ethos within their business, where they say empower your team, but don't micromanage. So in other words, balance giving freedom to your team, but still being available for advice. So let's now take a look at some of the common challenges faced by organisations when trying to grow a culture of innovation. So the first one, challenge 1, communication or lack thereof. George Bernard Shaw said, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion it has taken place. So let me just pick out some of the key stats on this slide before I give you the answer. In a study by Conga, a whopping 92% of organisations surveyed admitted they had experienced barriers when trying to drive transformational change. The Computing Technology Industry Study into Impact of Communication on Productivity identified that just over a quarter of all project failures were attributed to poor communications. And finally, one of the most important numbers quantified by Soapbox was that 80% of an organisation's opportunity for improvement comes from its frontline employees. Clearly, the answer is simple: communicate and listen to your people. I can confidently say that in nearly 100% of all discovery sessions we have run with organisations, lack of communication is the most common pain point. People generally feel the objectives of the business are not communicated to them, or they don't feel listened to. And in some extreme cases, they feel like their opinions and ideas don't actually matter at all. When it comes to developing a successful strategy for innovation, you have to go back to basics. You have to listen. Assume you know nothing. Ask key stakeholders to tell you what they do and really listen. It's not just about looking at Visio diagrams in business management systems. It's about really allowing the space for them to tell you what they do on a day-to-day basis without judgment. This is where you find the most common pain points, workarounds, and issues with existing business tools. In other words, this is where you find the majority of those sneaky secondary processes managed by, dare I say it, spreadsheets. Additionally, and importantly, you start to get a sense of your business's appetite for change, which I'll talk more about later. Discovery sessions are what a successful culture of innovation are built on. Run well, people leave feeling listened to and empowered, especially if biscuits are provided. It's now firmly in the business's hands to do something with those ideas and turn them into reality. This is a positive reinforcement to your teams that if you come up with an idea, you will be listened to. And let's face it, people talk. So this then breeds more ideas, more enthusiasm, and ultimately more innovation. Enthusiasm, in the case of innovation, can be seen as a catalyst for change. Another thing to communicate regularly is your direction of travel. Be clear about your innovation roadmap. What are you doing? Where are you going? And most importantly, why are you doing it? Tell your people what this means for them. And as much as possible, try to leave out no unanswered questions. Otherwise, people will fill in the blanks and make their own assumptions. And trust me, they are very rarely positive, warm, and fuzzies. Challenge 2, resistance to change. Charles Darwin says, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one the most responsive to change. So the answer? Know your change appetite. In the same study by Conga that identified that 92% of organisations had experienced barriers when trying to drive transformational change, the study also identified that 33% of organisations experienced resistance to change from workforce, and 24% even experienced resistance to change from their management. In order to know how to improve change and innovation within your organisation, you need to understand the root cause of the resistance. You need to understand what is your business's appetite for change. Understanding this means you can be armed with responses or actions to any immediate pushbacks. In my experience, these change appetites can be broken down into 4 categories. So the first, there's the we've always done it this way crew, probably the most challenging type of appetite to change. This group can commonly see technology and innovation as something too difficult or a threat, which is cool. Maybe they've had a really bad experience in the past. Organisations with this appetite for change generally have lots and lots of admin process, spreadsheets, or side processes that keep people busy. And that's not to say that what they're doing is important, it's just really inefficient and really hard to scale. The answer to this? Communicate the bigger picture and explain that doing things the same way we've always done it is really not a great use of their skill set or talent. Empower people to be the lever for change. Make being an ambassador for innovation and change part of their annual objectives. Give them something to own and celebrate when they deliver. Competition is also a useful tool to incentivize change, so find something that teams can compete on against in a healthy way. The second group is the we know we need to change, but it's not my job to change it. Again, challenging, but in no way a lost cause. This is most commonly seen within business who have gone through rapid growth, where the client base or service offering has grown rapidly, but the business hasn't been able to keep up. These businesses identify there must be a better way of doing things, but they just don't have the time to figure it out. Now, call me biased, but this is really where bringing in an external consultant can help. It gives the business a light at the end of the tunnel, someone to take on the heavy lifting of driving and implementing the change, and allows the key business members to be brought in as and when needed. They're treated as experts, and we all know it feels good to be asked your expert opinion on something. Slowly, as the innovation is implemented and the ideas are realised, the business sees the benefit of change and they start to embrace it more easily. But remember, a good consultant will always hand things back to a business, so the business needs to be prepared to continue to feed and support this new culture of innovation on its own. The third, I want it all, I want it now, and in fact, I wanted it yesterday. Delightfully ambitious, but sadly almost as challenging as the first group. It can be hard to manage the expectations with this lot, as the only answers they understand is, yeah, and I'll have it done in 20 minutes. Now, I love an ambitious CEO or MD, but what does keep me up at night are those leaders who like to promise things to a customer and then leave it to the innovators to figure out how to deliver it pretty rapido. We've all been there. The biggest thing here is to not suck the ambition out of these leaders. An overly enthusiastic CEO or MD can be the biggest ally when trying to improve a culture of innovation. What you need to get good at here is simply managing expectations for both your MD and your delivery team. Be clear on timelines and over-communicate on progress. Here's sometimes where a more agile approach to innovation really comes into play, as you can make visible small or regular improvements on the way to the final goal. The fourth group, change, it's part of who we are. This is the utopia. These guys are right in the middle of where you want any culture of innovation to be. Not too afraid to try something new, but measured about their approach. They've embraced change so much, it's part of the fabric of who they are. And because they've been through it, they understand the effort required in terms of resource, timelines, and access to funding. No work required here to change this appetite, just enjoy. So ask yourself, what type of business are you? Challenge 3, we don't have enough, insert whatever limitation you like here. Elon Musk says, if you're trying to create a company, it's like baking a cake. You have to have all the ingredients in the right proportion. So the answer, have the right ingredients. There are always reasons not to innovate. We don't have the time, we don't have the funds, people don't listen. It's always been this way, the list goes on. And so to build a culture of innovation, you need to have the right ingredients. So here are some of the key ones, in my humble opinion. We've discussed the importance of communicating and knowing what your change appetite is. The next is having a fail-forward approach to innovation, knowing and accepting that if you fail 99 times out of 100, that one time you don't, this is still moving forward. This is still innovation. It's about learning and giving people a safe space to try. How many great ideas have died on the vine simply because we gave up after the first go? Now, it's important to state here that a business can't sustain failing endlessly, and so that's not what I'm suggesting here. This is where the importance of defining your roots come back in, and making sure you have a clear direction and set clear boundaries with your innovation teams. Probably a really obvious one, but commonly overlooked, is celebrating the wins. Innovative companies celebrate wins. At one of our clients, you can nominate people for a super check. And this is issued to the employee if they've gone over and above or come up with a great idea. Innovative businesses also celebrate failure. Google sees rewarding failure as a way to reward creative thinking and to encourage risk-taking. Next on the list is access to knowledge. This is important when trying to A, innovate, or B, build a culture for innovation. This really goes back to challenge 1 on the importance of communicating and listening. The business needs to accept that in order to drive change, you need access to the thoughts and ideas of those key people within the organization, which basically means you need access to their time, which can sometimes be quite tricky. So be clear on how much time you will need from a subject matter expert, and be willing to settle for less or state your case and fight for more. Next on the list, maybe a little bit controversial, but sometimes leaders just need to get out of the way. I'm really sorry, leaders, but sometimes you're more of a hindrance than a help. And this links back to the balance of roots and wings. As a leader, take comfort in the fact that when it comes to innovation, it's not always your job to come up with innovative solutions, but it is your job to set up the boundaries or the rules of the game. Once these are established, as a leader, you can take on the role of the champion and promote the positive stories of innovation around the business, fueling the desire to do more and leaving the innovation teams to spread their wings and get on with the task at hand. Access to funding. This is one of the more obvious ingredients, and depending on how your organisation is structured, centralised or decentralised, it can be a bit more challenging. Centralised business models tend to have a lot more red tape to go through to access funding, as there are a lot more stakeholders to influence. Whereas a decentralised model, there may be less stakeholders, but perhaps the goals of your innovation strategy are less attractive to the local stakeholders. And given the choice between profit and innovation, some may choose the former. Now, I don't have a finance background, so I'm not about to comment on how you should set your cost allocation structure, but one consideration to reduce the financial barrier to innovation might be to set up a dedicated innovation fund. Next up, know where you are now on your innovation journey. So going back to the Conga study, when asked to rate the success of digital transformation initiatives, only 50% of companies rated them to be mostly successful. So, okay, cue the small Core 29 plug here, but when we were building our digital maturity assessment framework, we wanted to know why it was that even the best thought out digital roadmaps sometimes fail. The answer was simple and something completely overlooked: the need to see movement in a process. And the only way to know that you've moved is to know where you started from. So here's a bit of a real world example. Now, I am no runner, but the thought has always appealed to me. What appeals to me with running, certainly for the entry level I'm at, is you just stick on your trainers and go. At the start of my running journey, I would just be aimlessly running. I'd head out, run full speed for 10 minutes and then give in because it was too hard, and I'd burn myself out. I had no structure, I couldn't feel the winds, I had no appreciation of where I'd started to see how far I'd come. To me, it was just all too hard. So spurred on by the positive affirmations of a good friend who had recently started running, I signed up to a Couch to 5K app. And after a few weeks of sweating my way around the streets of Aberdeen, I started to feel different. The miles started to get just that little bit easier. I could see on the timeline in the app the progress I was making. I could see where I'd started. I could see where I was going. Now, I'm still no runner, and I'm certainly not smashing out 10Ks for fun like my friend, but I completed the app. And I've kept on going, fueled by new targets and ambitions. This just shows how important it is to see movement and progress, and how this can impact how much more likely you are to stick with a process, even when things get tough. The next on the list is a bit more of a practical one, particularly before you start on a digital journey. You should ask yourself if you are or will be a business that uses technology or a technology business, as this can have a significant impact on how you innovate from the get-go, particularly if at some point you want to sell your innovation. It's just worth bearing in mind. And finally, similar to the point about the leaders just needing to get out of the way, the following is important to remember. For successful delivery and adoption of innovation, it can't be IT-led. Really sorry, but it can't be finance-led either. It has to be business-led. So the final challenge 4, is everything is a problem. Abraham Maslow said, if you only have a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. So the answer, define the scope and define the problem. The problem with innovation is that knowing where to start can feel a bit overwhelming, lots of little fires burning everywhere. However, on the flip side, the problem with successful innovation is that sometimes we get too ambitious and suddenly everything is a problem. What that can mean for a business is that it doesn't really innovate at all, too afraid to start and too busy fixing everything and not actually fixing anything. Clearly, there's a bit of a balancing act to be played here. So in order to reduce that feeling of being overwhelmed, the risk of losing vision and people getting a strong case of the "are we there yet?" we need to find a way to be a bit more focused on where to point innovation. From a business perspective, you need to do a bit of analysis to understand what areas of innovation will have the biggest reward to the business financially, reputationally, and those that align with the long-term goals of the organisation. However, no less important though, you also need to assess these innovations against the more user-based measurements of time, efficiency, and job satisfaction. And at all costs, you need to try and take out any personal objectives. By using clearly defined measurables, you can start to prioritise innovation in order to get the biggest bang for your buck, which is, in business terms, ROI, but in culture terms is adoption and enthusiasm for more innovation, because let's face it, innovation is continual and doesn't stop with one idea. So in summary, innovation isn't easy, but nothing worth doing really ever is. So give yourself a break and build a culture that supports it from the start. Define your direction, set your roots. Identify the problems you're trying to solve, because not everything is a problem, and certainly not everything is a problem for right now. Get all your ingredients in place. So remove your barriers and support your wings. And above all, remember, communication is a two-way street. So talk to the people in your business, then listen to the people in your business. And when you think that you've talked and listened to them enough, talk to them and listen to them some more. Thanks very much for listening. Back to you, Mark.
Jay, thank you very much for that. And I'll repeat, if you'd like to ask any questions of Jay, just use the facility at the bottom of your screen and we will get to them after our next speaker. Who is Charles Clark, Director of Intellectual Property at Centrica, who wants to look at that particular issue in relation to the energy IT sector. So Charles, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you very much, Jay and Angus. Those were terrific sessions. I thoroughly enjoyed Jay's last session as well, talking about the culture of innovation. I think it'd be great if we could have a chat afterwards. Plenty of lessons from me. So let's talk about intellectual property and what it is in the IT sector, or more specifically for innovation. So for me, intellectual property is the currency of innovation. It's how innovation can be valued for you as your business. So I'm Charles Clark. I'm a director of intellectual property here in Centrica. My background is studied physics at university and went on to become an engineer within the defense and aerospace sector for about 7 years or so, before pivoting into the world of intellectual property, working in London and various other firms around the UK. And I've been doing that since for over 20 odd years now in various positions. So I see myself as an engineer first, and although I have qualifications as a patent attorney, very much lawyer second. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the innovations that we have going on in Centrica and how they link in. A lot of the innovations that we have are associated with the people in our digital transformation team. And that is primarily the vast majority, in fact, of the work and my interaction with the team in Centrica is through those guys, the skunk work teams, if you like. And their innovations come in the energy sector, obviously, giving the consumer control of their energy, how we can reduce the CO2 and get to our net zero targets. Some electrification of transportation is a major issue. And also in the distribution of energy through the networks, and how this can be achieved in a way that's going to be sustainable as more electric vehicles gets plugged in. You know, there is obviously a challenge there for the distribution network. So let's just get into it. And a brief introduction about Centrica. I hope a vast majority of you know Centrica, but you may not. So we have a heritage that goes back 200 years with innovations through the ages. And one of the earliest innovations was the gas meter, that everybody who uses gas in their house will have one on the wall registering the consumption of gas. We were born out of the privatization of British Gas in 1986. And for those of you who are old enough, you will remember Sid. I am just about old enough. I was a teenager at the time. And later, the privatized British Gas demerged. BG was formed to deal with a lot of the upstream exploration and extraction. And the Transco was formed to deal with the distribution of gas. And Centrica was formed with the consumer in mind, so the consumption side. But we also had assets in terms of Morecambe Field, and later on the Rough Field storage facility off the east coast of Yorkshire. So we own British Gas. We own other businesses as well. Many of you may have in your homes, such as Hive, the smart thermostats and other smart equipment, and also Dyno and some other businesses which are more on the B2B side, the energy management and trading side of our business, and also some interesting areas on how businesses consume energy and how we can help businesses to transform their energy needs. So as you can see, energy is at the core of what we do, and we're also very much involved in the net zero efforts across the board here in the UK and in Ireland. So some examples of innovation and some of the current projects that are going on in Centrica. The major two really are the electrification of transport, and this is something that Centrica has been in for a while now, almost 10 years. We're pioneering some products and services to enable this to happen. And what we bring to the party there is a lot of customer insight and data about what our customers need and what our customers want. And we're partnering with technology companies to build the right products and to build the experiences that our customers wish. Over to home energy management. So here we're investing in technologies of the future, which allow people to control their energy consumption in and around their homes. So, for example, our Hive business is highly visible in this area, but also we have some interesting pieces on demand side response, for example, and how domestic energy can be used to help balance the grid. And I'll get into that in a minute when we look at some of the features where the innovation lies. So we're focusing on delivering technology both in the sense of hardware, but also in platforms and customer experiences through apps and other such like. So digital is a big piece of our innovation as we move forward, and the guys in our digital transformation team are heavily involved across the whole of our business. Let's just take a quick look at home energy management, and here is just a very brief slide to introduce some of the concepts that we're working on. And so to heat your home at the moment, you may use a gas boiler. Gas boilers contribute to around 20% of the UK's CO2 emissions, just domestic gas boilers. So that is an area where there will be significant focus in the future, and the announcements that were made earlier this week by the government down in Westminster looking at reducing or accelerating the reduction of our CO2, this is going to be a huge area for us and for our British Gas part of the business. Here we're looking at alternative energy sources such as heat pumps, solar, battery storage in the home, and smart appliances and such like to help manage and reduce. We will also, I'm sure, in the future, very, very soon be looking at other features such as home insulation and keeping people warm more efficiently and more effectively. The smart thermostats have a role to play in the way that you can control your heating in your house and timing. There is lots of innovations that we have in that area, and also something that's not on here is the smart radiator valves that allow you to control heating around your house on a time basis. EV is a really interesting opportunity for us, electric vehicles, and we're partnering with some of the major household names in vehicles in this area, with Ford, Volkswagen and Honda and such like. And this has got very interesting potential in terms of how your car is charged, but also how your car can be utilized in your energy demands for your house. So vehicle to grid, for example, where essentially the EV is seen as a mobile battery. And when you bring it home, if the cost of electricity is particularly high at that moment, then you have a battery in your car that is free to discharge into your house to help you run your cooking, play the TV or such like. There's some interesting areas of innovation in that space. looking at the cost of energy on a short time scale every 15 minutes or so, and determining whether you should use low cost energy to consume to consume electricity in your home, to recharge your battery, or at a time of peak pricing, why not discharge the battery that's in your car, or if it's sunny outside, then the solar panel. Or if it isn't, hopefully the solar panel has recharged your battery in your house during the day for you then to discharge when the pricing is right. And there's also a community energy management piece to this as well, where the energy consumption can be shared amongst various communities. For example, I live quite close to a care home. If I had solar panels on my house during the day when I'm at work, albeit post-pandemic, and hopefully I can get back into my office, then maybe I could sell or share my unwanted energy being generated by my solar panels with local consumers here, the care home, for example, or a local business in the area. And we were previously looking at things like blockchain and areas in that digital space to help manage that sort of prosumer process of who was generating and who was buying what electricity. That's quite a challenging area for us, but one of which we continue to innovate in. We also like to practice what we preach, and let's talk about the electrification of transport. You may recognise the blue vans that British Gas have, and I think it's Scottish Gas up in Scotland. I must apologise, I'm south of the border. These are vans that obviously are driving around the UK every day, helping service people's needs, domestic needs, and such like. And currently, we have a majority of internal combustion engines contributing to the CO2 and emissions of the UK. Now, we have recently deployed 1,000 battery electric vehicle vans, like the one in the photograph here, and we have another 2,000 on order. And it's our ambition to be 100% EV for our fleet, for our van fleet, by 2025. So this is very much a current project for us and very exciting. But we need some innovation here in this space as well to make our engineers' lives as easy as possible. So if you can imagine, if you were a fleet user in the past, you may have been given a fuel card by your company to refuel your van. Whenever you pass a petrol station, you could just nip in and put it on the card. So here we're wanting to have a similar experience for our engineers, where they can recharge their batteries at any point, and if there's a charging point, or whether it's at home, if they return home at night with their van, then we need them to be able to recharge the van, obviously, for their next day's work, or during the day when they're at work, but we need to be able to reimburse them any costs. So we're working in the digital space and working with digital partners to help build a system that enables that to happen automatically, through payroll, for example, or through other means, through tariffs that we offer to our engineers and such like, so that they can get their electricity for the van that they're doing their job in without having been out of pocket for themselves. And for us as British Gas, obviously, we wish to be as efficient as possible. And so, we're looking at the tariff optimizations as well for us. So when the vans are being recharged during the evening, that the cost and efficiencies to British Gas are controlled to the best of our ability. So there's some very interesting areas of innovation within Centrica and British Gas in the digital space. I hope that gives you a good picture of those. So primarily, I'm here to talk about intellectual property and the value to a business that it can bring. What is IP? And quite often when I speak to people in the IT space, It's not internet protocol, obviously, it's intellectual property. So IP is pretty ethereal. It's an intangible asset. It's creations of the mind. It's the clever stuff that you guys do day in, day out. And it can be more easily explained, I suppose, by talking about inventions, patents, know-how, logos, artistic works, literary works, marketing materials, and such like. But you can also add to that list things like data, database rights, customer data, which is increasingly valuable across this space, and also methods for data analytics, which again is critical for us as a business. But these are really important assets for a business, and they have a value. They can be bought and sold. You can mortgage them, and you can raise capital against intellectual property rights as well. Indeed, in one of my former employers, we were owned by a private equity company, and the conditions of the loan from the bank were that the intellectual property rights were maintained at a certain level of valuation. So IP, it really is a significant and important asset for corporations of any size, and there are ways and means to protect those and to keep those assets safe for you as a business. So what does that mean in reality? Well, intellectual property rights are quite often seen as a right to exclude people from using your creation or having access to your creation, that whatever it may be. And patents, for example, are a means of protecting technical innovation that could be seen as a right to exclude others from getting in there. That's the traditional view, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And there are plenty of companies that still have a majority view in that space. I like to see it in this space, though, and certainly in this age and going forward, giving it a more progressive view of intellectual property, and it being the right to collaborate and to bring other people on board. It's the right to include as well as is the right to exclude other people. So for me, it's, no one corporation is so big that it can innovate absolutely all the needs that we need for British Gas. We need to partner with other companies. And so intellectual property rights can attract people in, but also give a degree of control over who can do what, with what, and when, and to whom. So to give it a bit of an easy way of putting it, there's an old saying that good fences make for good neighbours, and where IP are the fences in this relationship. So IP, in my view, and working at Centrica for the last 5 years or so, it's being created all the time in the IT space. And one of the challenges that I have had is getting people in this space to recognize when they've created IP and how to spot it. And one of the major challenges that I've had is the general belief that software isn't patentable. So, Charles, why are you here knocking on my door wanting to talk about the work that I'm doing today? Software is patentable in certain circumstances, and for sure, software should be seen as an intellectual property right for your business. So there are circumstances where the software will have an effect when it is run on the physical world. For example, I gave you the example of the home energy management piece for the vehicle to grid piece there. There will be a software controlling when the vehicle might want to discharge its electricity in times of high peak pricing, or take advantage of lower energy costs to recharge the battery. So there will be some software that enables that switch to happen. And there are plenty of patents in that space, believe you me. And that is because the software has a physical effect. And it's also, you would look to see that it is solving a technical problem with a technical solution as well. So those are the sort of pointers that a legal person like me would look out for. In the real world, if you're doing something new that's not been done before, if you're doing something technical that you've not done before, if you've had difficulties with a problem that you've overcome through developing some technology in some way or another, maybe bringing in new coding or another aspect of software from another part or another sector that's not been used in your sector before, then you have probably created intellectual property rights in that space. Now, there are certain ways to protect your IP, and they are complementary to one another. I've spoken briefly about patents. Patents take a long time to obtain, and they can be quite expensive. But if your business is in a space where you want to license, for example, your technology to others, then the patents can be very useful indeed for defining your space, your expertise. An example there is a piece of work that we've been doing with our call centres. So British Gas has call centres all over the UK, and at the moment, if you were to call one of the call centre staff members, they would have a checklist of items to go through that they have to go through with every caller. We, the guys in our Skunkworks, our digital transformation team, developed some software that enables the computer as a discussion is ongoing, and the call center staff can be inputting the problems that our customers are experiencing, and so this software starts to pick out a route through this checklist. Previously, that we'd have to go through every single thing, tick or cross every box. Now it's able to pick a route out using AI or machine learning to get our call center staff to the root of the problem for the customer as quickly as possible, leaving out the ancillary questions that would have formerly been asked are not necessary because of the particular problem that a customer is experiencing. And we have patent applications running on that. We partnered with well-known service providers and cloud-based companies to help us with that, and they have taken a real interest in this particular development because there are call centers all over the world in many different business sectors. So our patent technology then has enabled us to say to that service provider that, yeah, we're happy to develop this with you, and we're happy to give you access to this technology, which has formed as a part of this collaboration. But if you want to sell it and develop it elsewhere to other sectors, for example, the post office or somewhere where Centrica is really not interested and has no business at all, then please go ahead. But we'd like a little bit of payback because we put a lot of effort and a lot of time into developing this, and it's our creation that is applicable across other businesses. So maybe your services could be provided to us at a lower rate, or maybe you could pay us a royalty fee. And so there are many different ways in which the value of intellectual property can be leveraged through contracts or however it is you interact with your partners. So I hope that all makes sense. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found those 3 sessions enjoyable. The first 2 were great. I hope mine was equally as great. If you do wish to get in contact with me, then my email is provided here, or through the team that are providing the conference facilities today. Please do get in touch. Back to Mark. Thank you.